I like being attention deficit, right? I actually call it AIDS. It's an anti-indoctrination system. That's what I was blessed with at birth. But to listen to people that have poured their whole lives, everything, into learning a certain way and into a certain path, and the amount that we can learn from them is absolutely phenomenal. So help me welcome up Rob.
Do I need to use this, or can everybody hear me?
Oh, is that on?
Okay, I'd rather not use it. Who here has seen Ungrip? Everybody? Okay, excellent. So, yeah, this started for me really going down this path about 2000, 2001. That's really when my story is similar to Christina's and Lorena's, where I went through about 15, 20 years worth of depression, and it really came to a head, and it got to the point where I was attempting suicide, and I got to a point where I thought, you know what, I got to do something different or I'm literally going to die. And at that point I then surrendered my old ways of behaving and thinking and decided to go get some help and really work on what it takes to have a healthier relationship. And since then, we're 13 years from that point now, a lot has changed in my life. And you saw a little bit of it in Ungrip. I do whatever I can to share with people what I've gone through, because I'm not ashamed or afraid to share what I've gone through, because I believe that we all have similar kinds of challenges, just different degrees. And so Ungrip came out. I actually met Ben back in 2008 when I did my first workshop in Toronto, and he actually approached me and said, you know what, Rob, I really want to tell your story. And I go, no, I really don't want to do that. But it took, a couple of years before it really got to the point where, okay, I was ready, let's do it.
Yeah, I eventually convinced you.
Yeah. And so, you know, we worked together on producing Ungrip, and I believe the story that we shared is important. And what I wanted to do is, now that Ungrip's been out for about a year and a half, is follow up with what it's really going to take to govern the self. And so I'm working on a book right now. It's not done yet. I'm still in the process of writing it. But I thought, what better way to start introducing this than to have an event like this. You know, Ben wanted to come out and visit, and we kind of thought, well, let's do something while you're here. So at that point I approached Lorena and said, can you help us out? Because the reality is, I'm a guy. And despite all the work that I've done to bring my masculine into balance with the feminine, I thought it was very, very important to make sure that there's feminine energy here. And so I purposely went to somebody like herself to say, I need your help. I need the feminine energy to balance the masculine so that we can have a great event. And when I heard these two beautiful ladies up talking, I was literally bawling my eyes out in the back corner, because it's so beautiful what they're talking about. And ironically, it's what I'm going to be writing about in my book. So if you're interested in helping me out, I am asking for help to help me get this done so that we can get it printed and get it out to people, so that I can share my story, and hopefully my story will help you guys or other people resonate with it, and so we can start working on making the changes that the feminine talked about so beautifully here this morning. Okay? Everybody's familiar with this picture. Okay? This picture is of an elderly lady and a young woman. Okay? Now, does everybody see both of them? Does anybody not see them? Which one do you see?
The young one.
You see the young woman?
Yeah.
Okay, you're having trouble seeing the older lady?
Yeah.
Okay, so imagine this is her chin, this is her nose, her mouth, and she's wearing like a veil over top of her head, and this is her hair, and this is her eye. Do you see her now? Okay. Now I'm using this picture because it makes a great example of who we are in regards to the spiritual and the physical aspect of our being. Even though it's one picture, there's two aspects to it. And I'm going to go through a little demonstration here because, you know, we have, and I talk about it in my book, the physical realm and the spiritual realm. But there's also this fictional realm, and I want to show you how the fictional realm works. Okay? So we have this picture up here, but everybody's familiar with Mickey Mouse. Okay? It's a famous icon. Okay, well, let me share you a story. Okay? So while you're staring at this picture, see if you can follow along. Okay? Imagine Mickey Mouse sitting in his front yard. Okay? And he has a nice red ball. And he's playing with the ball, and Huey, Dewey, and Louie come along, and they start playing with Mickey Mouse with this ball, and they start bouncing it back and forth, and they're laughing and joking around. And then Goofy comes along, and the boys throw the ball at Goofy, and he accidentally steps on the ball and lands on his head, and you'll go the lead. Did everybody see that? Did everybody start picturing that in your mind and start playing along with the story? Okay, and you may even got to a point where you can see the red ball and the colors and all that kind of stuff. Okay, that's the power of our mind. Okay, those events did not happen. They're a fiction. Okay, and what we see going out in the world right now has a lot to do with our imaginations, and when people talk to us or share things, we have a propensity to create those images in our minds and start believing that these things actually exist. And when I say, like, the word corporation or the word government, we all think it exists, but they don't. They don't actually physically exist. And so what I want to express to people through my teachings, and I've been teaching now for 5 years, and my focus was to show people that these things don't exist, that they're a fiction, okay? And challenge people on why we put so much power into things that don't even exist, okay? And if we take a look at the truth of what they really are, these fictions are nothing more than a construct to describe our relationships with one another. But they're a default relationship. So if we don't put any time into building relationships with one another, then we can always use the default system. Because it's there, it's been there for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and we can choose whether we're going to put no effort in and just let the default system govern how we're going to interact with one another, or we can stand up and rise above that and establish our own relationships based on what we want within our relationships. In order to do that, though, I believe that we need to confront who we are, similar to what they were talking about this morning, and confront why we're in these relationships and what we're getting out of them and how we're reacting to events that happen in our lives. Okay? Now, in order to do that, I believe we have to get down to the basics. And for me, when I was recovering from depression, part of that process was confronting myself on the things that were going on in my mind, the words that I was using to describe who I was or how I was going to react to things, or the words that I use. Because a lot of the words, a lot of the internal dialogue that I went through was, oh, I can't do that. Oh, I'm not good enough. Or, no, I don't want to do that. Most people have a hard time when I tell you that 15 years ago, I was an abusive, I was passive aggressive, mentally abusive to my wife and people around me. I was angry. I used anger and frustration to try to control and manipulate people. And I didn't believe that I could do a lot of things. I wanted to blame everybody else. It was always somebody else's problem. Okay? The problem wasn't me, it was my wife, because she wouldn't do something, or my kids, or my parents, or my boss, or my coworkers. It was always external to me. And one of the things that I learned when I recovered from my depression, I actually had to go through a program at the University of Alberta Hospital here, where I spent 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, for 18 weeks, being confronted on my shit. And it was the hardest 4.5 months of my life. It was a full-time job dealing with this internal dialogue. But it changed and saved my life. Okay? And what I'm writing about in my book is all that process that I went through to confront this thing. Okay? Because this thing got in the way of a lot of happiness, joy, healthy relationships, and that sort of thing. Okay? And it was this thing that said, you know what, I don't want to do this. Because I was confronted on my stuff all my whole entire life. But I was so stubborn and so pig-headed that it didn't matter what anybody said, I wasn't ready to listen. And what it took was a life-altering, what's the word I'm thinking of? Disturbance to make me change my mind and make me realize, okay, I got to do it some different way. Okay, and I believe that what we're witnessing in the world right now is a prelude to a disturbance of a global proportion to help us make that shift so that we can realize there's got to be a better way. Okay? And that disturbance can take place within the individual itself, or you can just go with the flow and do it with everybody else. I chose to listen to that disturbance that happened back in 2000, 2001 and start at that point. And I believe that happened for a reason. I believe it was divine so that I can get to a point where I'm at today to help individuals like yourselves, very much like what the Goddess Layer is doing for people as well. Okay. One of the exercises I learned was to help us through this process is there's 168 hours in a week. Now, you guys can go through the process if you want, but out of that 168 hours, where do we spend our time? Because our time is finite while we're here, and it's valuable. Pardon?
Bed and work.
Bed and work?
And the bathroom.
We have sleep, we have work.
Eating and food preparation.
Eating, bath stuff, personal grooming.
Exercise and leisure.
Internet, entertainment, cooking, commuting, meditating,
Socializing.
socializing. Okay. Shopping, gotta get food and stuff, right?
Driving.
I have commuting.
Learning.
Family. So somebody said something over here.
Learning.
Learning. Okay, good. Now what you can do is you can go through and you figure out, well, how many hours a week do you sleep? So as you go through this list, you figure out how much time you do, and it all should add up to 168. Okay? So this would be a good way to show where you spend your time. Okay? Now there's another list. Let's quickly run that list through. What's important to you? Anyway, pardon? Family?
Healthy, clean food.
Healthy food?
Sleep.
Learning.
Learning?
Community.
Community?
Nature.
Nature? Anything else?
Yoga, meditation.
Yoga, meditation?
Life's purpose?
Your life purpose? Anybody, anything else?
So kind of go along with the last one, but your art, your
Art?
passion in art.
What about your own happiness, your own joy? Like, what about you? What about the I? Are you important? You know, some of these would go in there, like the yoga and, you know, the clean food and that kind of stuff. Okay? Now, if you did this at home, the next step then would be to put this list beside this list. Or do they match up? Not even close. Okay? Particularly in a depressed individual like myself. Because for me, out of 168 hours, about 80 hours spent sleeping. Almost half my time. Okay? And I also used work as an addiction. Addictions, whether it's, you know, smoking or drugs or, you know, computers, TV, some entertainments. Shopping could be even addiction. You know, pornography, sex, all those kind of things. Anything to distract your mind from, you know, recognizing the truth and you reaching and feeling stuff. Those are all there to distract you from the truth of who you are. So for me, I used work as a distraction. You know, there was, you know, 60, 80 hours there, okay? I didn't really do a lot of eating. I didn't do a lot of grooming. I did no exercise. Internet was huge for me. Internet, entertainment, TVs, that kind of stuff. You know, that accounted for a good 80 hours a week as well too. And, you know, I made my wife do all the cooking and the cleaning and all that kind of stuff. So when I went through this when I was depressed, does this look balanced? No, it's completely off balance. Okay? And when I did this exercise after I was done my recovery, and when I was happy, then all of a sudden the amount of sleep went drastically down. I didn't work nearly as much, you know, 40 hours a week, and I told my boss that's all I'm doing. Because one of the things that I realized is it's very, very important for me to have boundaries. Because I didn't have any boundaries. I just let people do whatever they wanted, and I go, oh, okay. Or I didn't respect other people's boundaries, so I then went and did whatever I wanted to them. Forced my will upon others. So within that relationship, boundaries is extremely important. And those boundaries are there to serve me. Okay? So when I went through this, I then realized, well, I spent no time with my family. All these items on here, I didn't spend any time on. So I realized if this is important to me, then I got to find the time. Let me rephrase that. I got to make the time to do it. Which meant internet, entertainment. I do a little bit of it, but I focus more on the family. And for me, you know, doing laundry and cooking was extremely important for me because that's how I can demonstrate my love for myself. Because the reality was I didn't love myself. And so it didn't matter what I did to my body or to my mind or to my spirit. I abused it considerably. I was on pharmaceutical drugs. Oh, it was just insane, the addictions that I had. And I abused my body tremendously. I'm actually very grateful I'm alive today because I should be dead. Okay? And so for me, doing my own laundry, doing my own cooking, bathing, shaving, all that kind of stuff are things that I can do to demonstrate my love for me. Because then I realized when I got to a point where I loved myself, then I can express that love to other people. Because until I got to a point where I loved myself, I couldn't love anybody else. I didn't have the capacity for love because I had no idea what it meant or what it was. Okay? And so the time that I spend is a demonstration of love. And time, for me, is the greatest gift another human being can give to another. Okay? Because things are just things, okay? But time is by far the biggest and greatest gift to demonstrate love. If you love your wife, you love your kids, you love yourself, then you would spend time with them. And lots of it. So what we chose to do is we quit the job. I had a very good job here in the city working in IT. We quit the job, we sold the house, we went out into the country, and my family spent all day long with one another building earthships and looking after livestock, and we do everything together. I'm not gone from my family 8 hours a day anymore. Well, except for today, but for the most part, we spend every waking moment together. Because that's important to me. And we grow our own food, because that's a demonstration of the love that I have for my own body and for my kids and my wife. Okay? We got to a point where we're now very comfortable with the amount of time that we spend, so now it doesn't matter if I can, leave for a day or two. I know that they're going to be there when I get back. So for me, I had to get down back to basics. Okay? And the basics is like food, clothing, shelter, social interaction. Those kind of things were something that I had to focus on in order for me to recover from my depression and demonstrate that love for myself. And that's why we went out into the country and started doing that. But that also forced me to then look at all my other relationships. Because I was an abuser in my relationships, I'm very consciously aware of some of the techniques and things that abusers do to abuse others. And when my wife started learning about homeopathy, she started introducing me to things like, natural person and, the things that were going on in the medical system and that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden that tweaked me, and it started waking me up, and I realized they're no different than I was. They're being abusive just like I was. And so I have a choice. I can either continue with that relationship or say, you know what, you've hit a boundary, stop. You do not have my consent or permission to continue abusing me. Okay? And that decision is what prompted me to say, I'm done. I'm going to grow up and become a responsible, accountable adult. Because I realized that I was still in a child-parent relationship. I was a child, the state was the parent, and the state was using benefits and privileges to look after its children, just like when I was, 5 years old, when I was at home with mom and dad. And when I grew up when this physical vessel became 18 years old, I was not emotionally or mentally prepared or mature enough to be an adult. And so I looked for another parent without being consciously aware of it. And that's why I just love groups like this because they're there to call you on your shit and to confront you and literally hold up the mirror in front of your face and say, looky, looky. And you know what? The process is not easy. It's hard. And having people like this to support you through that process is gold. And that's what I had when I went through the day treatment program. But I also found that I needed more help. So I submersed myself in the martial arts. And I used the martial arts as a physical form to help me with my mental discipline. Okay? Because the mind is a tool, just like Lorena was talking about, but it is a horrible tool for making decisions. And I completely submersed myself in the intellect for most of my life, and it was a disaster. Okay? And it took a whole bunch of cosmic 2x4s inside of my head, to use your quote, to make me realize that this isn't the way. So let me show you a little diagram. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah. Everybody's familiar with this image?
Yep.
When I was trying to find a way to explain this in my book, I then realized, well, Da Vinci had already done it, a few hundred years ago. But you'll see that there's two images here. And what I found is that he's trying to portray in a graphic image the duality that is within us, between the spiritual and the physical realm. Okay? So what I'm going to do, though, is we're looking at the image from the front. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the image apart and look at it from the side, just so I can do a little writing here, okay? Next slide. Okay. Now imagine this being physical representation, and this is a spiritual. Okay. Now, our intellect, our mind, is a manifestation of the physical. Okay? It's a very good calculator and logic processor and storage device for storing memories and all that kind of stuff. Okay? Now, if I was to draw the fictional realm, it would be a small little corner in this okay? Doesn't actually exist, but the power of our mind creates it because we were created in the image of the Creator. So we have the capacity to create. Okay? And the mind, when you say a word, a friend of mine, her 7-year-old told her one day, Mom, when you spell a word, you're casting a spell. And her and I just went, you're right. It came from a 7-year-old. Brilliant. Okay? And that's why words are so important. That's why I spent 5 years or 8 years studying words, 5 years teaching about words, so that we can be consciously aware of the spells that we're casting. Okay? And that's how powerful this thing is. But it's a horrible decision maker. Okay? That's a conscious mind. So one of the things I realized through my studying is that we got to bring this into balance somehow. How do I bring this into balance? So I believe in the Christ consciousness. Okay? I believe that it's our job to bring that Christ consciousness into our existence so that we can bring everything into balance. Okay? The Christ consciousness is all about balance. So there's a balance here between the physical and the spiritual. Now everybody's familiar with the what's the word I'm thinking of? Chakras, thank you. Okay, where are the chakras? We've got the crown, third eye, throat, heart,
solar plexus,
solar plexus,
Sacrum and the root.
and the root. Okay? Now, I believe that we're supposed to bring these into balance too, and we balance them at the heart chakra. And I also believe that our spiritual being has a mirror copy of the chakras so that we can connect the spiritual to the physical. Okay? There needs to be a way to connect these two together, and it's through the chakras so that we can get this melding taking place between the two parts of our being. Okay? Now, you notice what happens when we bring the chakras into balance and we bring our physical and spiritual into balance? What happens? We got the cross for the Christ impulse. Okay? Now, when we merge the physical and the spiritual together, there's a consciousness that takes place. And that's the creation of our soul. Okay? So the merging of the two, I hope everybody can see this. I know I'm getting pretty low here, but I just spelled that wrong, but that's okay. You get the idea. So when you merge the two together, that's the creation of our soul and the consciousness. And the thing I'm missing is that this spiritual body has a mind as well. Okay? And that mind isn't based off of the head, but through the heart. Okay? And this is our connection to God's source. Okay? And unfortunately, a lot of us are completely disconnected from that mind. And for me, I found that because I focused on this mind so much, I completely ignored my spiritual mind. Okay? And because of that, I wasn't listening. I didn't have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. Okay? And it's this mind and this Christ consciousness is where our feelings come from. Okay? Feelings are very, very different than emotions. Emotions are our choices on how we're going to react to events that happen in our life, which occurs up here. They're 100% based on choice. Okay? If somebody does something to you, you have a choice. You can get angry, or you can say, you know what? No. Or you can say, I want to talk about this. I want to explore what's going on. We always have choices on everything we do in our life. Okay? We choose to get angry. We choose to get frustrated. We choose to be happy. We choose to be sad. These are all choices. Okay? And those point to root causes that are really going on within ourselves that we need to work on. Okay? And when we can have the discipline to start to control this thing and put it under our command, then we can quiet this thing down so that we can start listening to this one. And that's where the martial arts really helped me, and that's where that day treatment program really helped me, is because this thing was completely out of control. And if you want to put an idea or an energy to it, you can call this the devil.
Mm-hmm.
Because when this thing's in control, it's hell on earth.
Internal terrorist.
Okay? And I would rather be guided by my spirit mind rather than this physical mind. Everybody follow? Everybody? Oh, and I'm going to say a couple other things. For me, this isn't all of it, because I know that there are things that I don't know. Okay? And so I'm going to put a whole bunch of question marks out here.
Yep. Absolutely.
And I believe my job is to explore all of that throughout my existence. That's what I'm here to do. My job is to have relationships and build those relationships based on truth and love, because this mind is all about love. Okay? And compassion and empathy and all of those things we're looking for. Peace, freedom, those all exist over here. Those are all expressions of our spiritual mind. Okay? Greed, ignorance, fear, all that kind of stuff is based out of this mind. But I'm not saying that this thing is bad. That's not what I'm saying. It's just a tool, just like a hammer. Okay, I can, pound nails and build a house with a hammer, but I can also kill somebody with it too. This tool, we need to learn how it works and learn how it functions so that we can command it. So that we are the boss, not this thing. Okay? And so when I take a look at all of this, and take a look at all of this, this is the I am. Okay? When we encompass everything that we are. So when we have somebody, are you a person? Well, no. Are you Christina? Well, no, that's just a name, right? Okay. So what are you? You know what? I have no idea what I am because I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm still trying to learn what it's all about.
Everything or
Okay.
nothing.
And when Christ said the kingdom of God is within you, there's the kingdom. Okay? So when you want to talk about jurisdiction, this is my jurisdiction. Okay? This is where I live, and this is my relationship with the Creator, because this is all divine. Okay? Now, keeping this in mind, okay, there's another part of the relationship I want to show. Okay, just close the. How are we doing for time? Okay.
17.
Now, when we take a look at my other relationships, because for me, I believe that we're here to explore our individuality. There's a lot of New Agers out there, oh, we're all one. Yeah, you know what? We are all one, but we're not. There's a paradox taking place. And that paradox is demonstrated in the Christ consciousness, and the Christ consciousness is supposed to bring balance to all those paradoxes. Okay? One of those paradoxes is the feminine and the masculine. Okay? We have feminine energy here being displayed with the females in the room, and the masculine being displayed with the males in the room. But I believe that it's my job to bring that balance into, the feminine and the masculine, into balance within myself as well. It's not good enough for me to have the balance between other individuals, but I need that balance within myself. So I worked really hard to get in connection with my feminine part of who I am. And what kind of characteristics do we associate to the feminine? Nurturing, sharing, giving, those kind of perception. Okay? How about the masculine? Doing, protecting, providing. Okay, those kind of personalities. Okay. Now, is that saying that all guys can't be nurturers or givers? No, that's the job that I had to work on really hard in order to accept that into my own life. And my wife did the same thing too. Like, most people don't realize, but my wife and I were separated for 3 years. We were like days away from signing the divorce papers. Because of my abuse, we separated. And what happened through those 3 years is that, I got a lot of work done, and I did a lot of changing. But she did too. Because she was on the other end, she had to learn how to establish boundaries and that sort of thing within herself as well. And so what we did is, after about 3 years, we, because I have 2 boys, they were quite young, and we started talking, and we thought, you know what, let's give this a shot. But it took talking for 3-4 hours a night for months, because this wasn't a new relationship. We weren't trying to get to know one another. We were talking and talking and talking in order to deal with all the crap that happened in the past, and to establish the boundaries, and to work out, how the relationship was going to go. Because we had a codependent relationship before. I was actually a child looking for a mom to look after me. Okay? But now we were going in as two independent individuals, and we didn't want to lose our individuality in the relationship. And a lot of people lose their individuality in order to fit into groups and to, kind of belong and that sort of thing, because they're afraid of what other people might think or say or do. And that fear is unfounded, because I believe that me standing as an individual and ensuring that I don't lose myself to other people or other relationships has proven great wonders in my own life. But that's what the Christ consciousness is all about, is to bring that within myself, to bring that balance and make sure I'm centered within myself. Okay. Now, because of that, I also had to recognize now that if I'm going to have a healthy relationship with myself, now I have the capacity to have a healthy relationship with my wife. And I stepped up and I said, okay, I'm going to say no to the state and all that they're offering, because that's abusive. And now I need to work on other relationships. People had on the list food, nature, that sort of thing. So what's my relationship with all that stuff? Okay. Because in nature, I believe nature also has a physical and a spiritual component. And depending on the frequency or vibration of what we're talking about would depend on how my relationship works and the type of spirit and the type of physical manifestation that occurs as a result. Okay? And so, I'm thinking out loud here, and I'm thinking, well, inorganic material like, rocks and that kind of stuff, probably can start down here. Because I believe they have a spiritual component as well too. Because I believe that the spirit, the intent of the spirit, is what causes the manifestation of the physical matter.
Absolutely.
Okay? And so the earth herself, all the rocks and the air, water, those kind of things have a spirit. And then we can go to the organic material, maybe single-cell life forms. Plants. And as we go up, the spirit of the individual is also increasing. Animals. And I'm contemplating the idea right now, considering that there's going to be a point here where consciousness, the ability to identify with the self, the I am, I exist, therefore I am kind of idea. And I'm contemplating the idea that there's a certain number of animals that have crossed this line. Be it whales or
Dolphins.
elephants, dolphins, those kind of animals.
Yep.
Okay. And then there's us. And then after that, we're still on our way to the Creator. But this is all divine. This is all based on a grand plan by the Creator in order for us to learn how to have a relationship with all these things. And part of our journey, I believe we're put here because we're to replenish the earth. It says it right in Genesis. Okay? We are to replenish the earth, which means that we're not here just for our own selfish means, but because we are a higher vibration form, we have a duty to all the lower vibration spirits and physical matter on this planet. That doesn't mean we can just go out and slash and burn and rape and pillage the earth. We have a duty to ensure that not only we prosper, but they all prosper as well too. Okay? And so now my job is to work with my relationship with the animals and the plants and figure out, how does nature work? Because if I'm going to make it, my duty is to bring it prosperity, then I have a job to do. And I believe that nature, including ourselves, our physical vessels, have a default setting. Okay? So if we just run everything by default, it will tick along just fine and perform and multiply and all that kind of stuff. But just like what I learned in the martial arts, my physical body can do way more than what I think it can. And I trained for 10 years to get my body to perform at optimum levels. Okay? How many people here, if I held a board this high off the ground, can break it with your foot? Nobody?
More.
Pardon?
Not anymore.
I challenge you on that statement.
Never tried it.
Will you repair the consequences?
I believe any one of us in here could break that board with some training and guidance and practice. It takes time, but our own internal dialogue prevents us from actually accomplishing feats of amazing, divine excellence. Okay? And one of the things that I figured out is that the biggest challenge, the biggest roadblock in my life is this thing. Okay? And so I believe that nature can perform the same way too. And we have companies right now doing GMO, sitting there playing around with the DNA and all that kind of stuff. I think they're playing with forces they do not comprehend.
Yep.
And it is extremely dangerous. Instead, if we took the time, okay, remember the time thing, how important time is? If we took the time to have a relationship with the plants and animals, do you think we could figure out how they are truly designed so that we can then step up as a proper steward and work them so that they can perform beyond their default settings?
Yep.
Absolutely. To a point where I believe this earth can easily support 50 billion people. No question. Without chemicals and pharmaceuticals and GMO crap and all that stuff. Okay. But it's going to take time and effort in order to have that relationship. Can we do that when we're sitting here in the city?
Well,
It'll be tough because the city is a mechanical device
creates dependence.
created to remove us from the normal ebbs and flows and cycles of nature. Okay? And I found that our lives changed overnight as soon as we got out of the city and started listening and observing and living with the ebbs and flows of nature. Okay? Clocks, calendars, getting up at 6:30, having a shower, going to work, coming back home, and doing that 5 days a week, and then going out into nature for a weekend. Forget it. Complete submersion in nature so that I can learn how these things work, so I can start observing, so that I can then start working them, very much like my Taekwondo instructor worked me, to show them that they can actually perform more than what they're doing naturally.
I'm sorry, Rob, there's an arrogance in that statement.
How's that?
Well, it just feels like we're in command of these creatures. And this isn't good right.
Well, I'm not saying we're in command. I believe my job is to be a steward of it, so that I can help them prosper.
At their fullest potential.
I understand what you're saying. It just brings, I hope you can, I can't argue this with you. It's just a gut feeling that I've got with that statement.
Okay. Well, you know what? And I'd be more than willing to talk to you about it and work it out.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm not, opposed to having those kind of discussions because I know it will help me write a better book.
It has been shown that dolphins and whales have a more advanced nervous system than humans do.
Yeah,
There's a
absolutely.
question back.
I want to mention, maybe it'll help, that I don't think that by design the way it is, that we're not put above all of those under us, but we all have our part in the cycle.
Yeah, I'm not saying we're better than them.
That's right.
I'm just saying that, we are at a higher vibration, and as our vibration goes up, we're just different. But we still have to work with one another and recognize that we depend on them. Our physical body depends on the plants and the animals. We need them to survive. But I also believe our spirit, the growth of our own spirit, depends on how well we treat them,
Absolutely. Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because, right now, and this is something that Christ said, like if I lust after a woman, then I'm harming her. But for the longest time I couldn't contemplate how in the hell does that work? Because I didn't actually physically do anything. But it's not at a physical level, it's at a spiritual level that occurs. And so when we can start recognizing that there's a spirit to everything, that changes my relationship with everything. Because I not only have to work out my relationship physically, but I also have to work it out spiritually as well too.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now with nature, has anybody heard of Wilhelm Reich, Dr. Reich?
Yep.
A few people? Okay. Dr. Reich had an idea, everything operates in a 4-beat cycle. Okay. And I found with our artificial, fictional world, everything's all very digital. And being in the IT industry, I can do this, but digital is either on or off. It's either yes or no. It's right or wrong. Okay, it's very polar, black and white kind of thing. Okay, but I find that through my relationships now with people and nature and that kind of stuff, that there's many shades of gray and many colors in between. Okay, and it's not always black and white. And nature works that way. So in our artificial environment, it's either on or off. Okay? So you can see how mechanical this is versus how fluid nature is. And Reich was talking about how everything follows this 4-beat cycle. And we start with a charge. Got the terminology now. Okay, so we go through a charge cycle where the amount of energy is increasing, then we climax, and then we feel the energy discharge, and then we go through a period of relaxation. Okay, and what Reich was talking about is, everything from cell division up to the cycles of nature, where you could literally view winter as a relaxation period. Spring is all about charge, the sexual charge, productivity, production, thank you, where animals are having babies, all that kind of stuff. Summer, all about growth and maximizing the amount of growth, because in the fall, you're then squirreling away things, storing, freezing, getting ready for winter, so that when winter comes, you relax and you rest. Okay, and we don't follow this cycle anymore. We're completely disconnected from it. And I found that what we're doing out on our property is that we need to follow this cycle, because we need to be consciously aware that if I go down to the grocery store, I can get tomatoes any time of the year, but that's mechanical. Okay. But if I'm living in this cycle, I realize that the only time I can get tomatoes is in the fall. And so our current systems like our food system, for example, has recognized that, well, it can only get things in the fall, but they can use chemicals and preservatives and all that kind of stuff so that they can store it, so that they can then provide you with fresh vegetables any time of the year. And because of that, because we're disconnected from this and expect from our food system fresh tomatoes all year round, now they bastardize our food in order to produce or provide you with convenience because you moved away from this cycle and moved into this cycle. So if you want good food, move from this cycle back to this cycle. And recognize that you're going to have to, plan out what your garden's going to do, and then get out there and plant the seeds and work in the garden and nurture it, and then when the seeds, flower, they're producing, and all of a sudden fruit is being born, so that in the fall you then have to collect it all and then learn how to can and freeze and do whatever you can so that you have that food for the rest of the year until you can get back to the next cycle when you can harvest. Now, for me, the biggest challenge in all of this was to figure out, how do I govern myself through all of this? And who here has taken any of my workshops? Good part, half of you? Okay. A good part of my workshops is to show you what steps we've done to govern myself rather than having somebody else figure out what's best for me. Because everybody else, particularly in the state, is functioning on this mechanical, intellectual paradigm, and I don't want to live there anymore. So I want to step out of that and live in this paradigm, but that requires that I take steps to govern myself in order for me to do that. Which means that I had to go through and tell the state, you know what? No. And one of the things I find really interesting about this, how many people here have kids? Most people. What happens when they were 2 years old? We call it the terrible twos. Okay? Why?
Why?
No. No. Okay? Why are they doing that?
Boundaries.
Pardon?
Boundaries.
No.
Question authority.
No, I think what they're doing is that they're exploring their own individuality. They're expressing themselves. And what do us parents do?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay? But why do we do that? Because we have a belief that their mental and emotional capacity is not developed enough yet, and they can actually harm themselves or destroy themselves because of it. Okay? And so as a result, we grow up, and by the time we turn 18, we're so used to hearing no and that kind of stuff that any confrontation whatsoever results us in,
Yeah.
okay. So what I'm trying to do in the book is tell people, you know what? It's time to stand up and start learning how to say no again. Okay? It's time to reach back into our childhood and see what it was like to be 2 years old and start expressing our individuality. And maybe perhaps by us standing up and saying no, we can bring some attention and make people realize, oh, this isn't working anymore. Because what does a bully want?
Wants to submit.
Bully wants submission and no publicity.
Lunch money.
Yep. Okay. And our fiction that we created is no different than a bully. Okay? Or no different than a spouse that's abusing another spouse. And when we take a look at spousal abuse for a second, okay, why does the other spouse typically don't leave the abuser?
They feel they deserve it.
Pardon?
Too much invested.
Too much invested? They loss? Fear? Okay.
Identify.
There's a component to this, and it has to do with death. Now, we're so afraid of death that we decided not to live.
Yeah.
But we need death in order to live, and we need life in order to have death. It's a part of what we're experiencing here. Okay? Organisms, plants need dead material in order to have the nutrients and that kind of stuff to grow. Well, for me, the hardest part of working through my depression and recovering from all that was to let go of those behaviors or those thought patterns that provided comfort for me. It's not that it wasn't painful, it was just familiar. And I found great comfort in that familiarity because I knew at least what to expect. Okay? But saying no and saying goodbye to my relationship to the state, to corporations, all that kind of stuff, was something that I had to spend some time on and mourn the process because there's an empty part of me. I realized that, there's some wonderful people that work in these organizations. There's well-intended people. There's people there that truly want to help and serve people. Not everybody in these organizations are criminal or looking out to, stomp on your rights or any of that kind of stuff. I have a sister who's a police officer here in town, sergeant. My brother is a police officer in Medicine Hat. His wife is a police officer. My mom's brother and brother-in-law are police officers. So I'm very familiar with the state and the service and the intent that they went into it with. Okay? But for me to step away from that required me to say goodbye and to express and feel loss. And I had to go through a mourning process. And, that has a huge impact on how I feel. And until I got to a point where I can start feeling, I avoided that at all costs because it scared the hell out of me. And it also came to a point where I had to admit, you know what, I screwed up. I hurt people. I made a lot of mistakes. And I had to come to terms with that and what that meant to myself and how much I hurt other people as a result. And so what I did is I had to go through that mourning process, and it takes time. It takes time to work through some of those emotions and some of those feelings, but I got to a point now where I recognize how beneficial it is, so now I embrace it. I'm excited. For me, confrontation is a learning opportunity. I used to avoid confrontation at all costs, but there's healthy confrontation and there's unhealthy confrontation. Okay? Unhealthy confrontation would be, you asshole, you're... Okay, notice what I'm doing though?
Yeah.
Everything's there, right? Okay. What I do now though is I ask pointed questions, and I'm not afraid to share with people how I feel or what I think. I call things the way I see them. And if somebody is being a jerk, you know what? I'm going to say something. Because my relationship with that other individual is too important not to say anything.
Exactly.
And that's why I appreciate, people like what Hart did to say, hey, you know what? I'm not sure if that resonates with me. Thank you. I wish more of us would do that. And that confrontation sometimes is a painful process, but I'm more than prepared to work through the pain because I know that the benefits are going to be way more than what I expected. So when it comes to the state, because I established a different jurisdiction, okay, I now have a pretty good idea that I can stand on who I am and know that I don't fit in any fictional jurisdictions that they've come up with. Okay? If they want a relationship with me, guess what? I demand that they spend time with me to build that relationship. If they're not willing, prepared to spend time, see ya. Okay? I'm an individual and I'm going to express my individuality. If you don't agree with me, great. If you do, great. Either way, great, because I believe my job is to share with you guys so that you can find it within yourselves to express who you are, exactly like what Lorena was talking about this morning. Okay? We're not all going to agree. We don't all have to fit in the same box. We're all going to do different things. We all have different skills. We all have different abilities that were given to us when we had this spiritual journey to manifest in this physical reality. We're here for a specific purpose. And my goal is to help people explore that so that they can express themselves and explore what their purpose is in life. Because that's what we need now. We need that more than ever. We need people to step out of the mechanical and start expressing what their heart truly desires. And I believe we can't do that if we're still behaving like children, participating in a parent-child relationship. It's time to grow up. It's time to take off our diapers and start looking after and being responsible for ourselves. And start working on relationships so that we can have healthy relationships with one another. And if we're going to do that from the paradigm of a child mentality, we're doomed. We need to all stand up and grow up and look at these relationships as adults. 100% responsible, accountable adults. One of the things to help us in that process is to recognize that a lot of things that are happening in our lives are symptoms. And one of the hardest things that I found when I was going through my recovery from my depression was my certain behaviors or my actions or my thought processes or the words that I was using was a symptom of a much deeper rooted problem. And sometimes it's really hard to look past the symptoms and look at the root cause. And our medical industry right now is infamous for treating symptoms, and they absolutely abysmal job of getting to the root cause. Because I believe the vast majority of physical problems is rooted in emotional trauma. It has nothing physical to do whatsoever. And so if we can start working through the emotional traumas that we're going through and start letting go of all the hurt and those traumas and pain and suffering that we're holding on to, and because we're holding on to it, the body needs a place to stuff it and store it, and that's what cancer and all that kind of stuff is all about, is the body's storing all this stuff and it's got to go somewhere. So the body's job is doing exactly what it's designed. It's storing it there for you so it doesn't kill the organism. Okay? The body wants to heal, and so if we start letting go of all these emotions and those traumas that we're holding on to, then the body can go, good, I can get rid of that. But sometimes, we need a little bit of help, and I know for my wife, through homeopathy, some of the alternative healing therapies can help kind of give you a little push, and so you can, feel those emotions coming out and start processing, letting your body process it all so that it can let it all go. And sometimes just even a word might not be enough, but there's a lot of things that we can do energetically, and that's what homeopathy is all about, to start that process so we can get the body flushing all this crap out, so we can get the body back to its original design, and then it can start performing as it was originally intended to. And I see no reason why, if we can't explore this properly, there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to live 900 years like we used to.
Exactly.
Okay? And then we can actually have long, fruitful, rewarding, rich lives as a result. Okay. So that's kind of, I don't know how I'm doing on time here, but a few minutes. Does anybody have any questions? Or, that's kind of the premise of what my book is all about. And, I'm probably about 3/4 of the way writing through it. My goal is to have it done by this summer so that I can have it out in print for this fall. And if people have feedback or comments, I appreciate them. Go ahead.
It doesn't directly relate to this, and yet it does. There's a saying apparently in the Bible where it says, "Render unto Caesar what is his, and to God what is." I really don't understand that. Do you have a concept of what that means?
Well, my concept, now if I was to use this paradigm to explain it, render unto Caesar, what is Caesar's? Render unto God, what is God's? So Caesar is all the fiction. So statutes, regulation, money, pieces of paper, all that stuff all belongs to Caesar. That's why I sent it all back. Like, I don't have a driver's license, I don't have registration, insurance, passport, birth certificate, Alberta healthcare card, marriage certificate. Those are all Caesar's. So I said, you know what? That doesn't fit with who I am anymore. Have it back. It's yours. So I gave it to him. But I then decided, well, I got to give this on to God. So now God is my master. So I'm going to work through His jurisdiction, not theirs. And for those that are like first, just exploring, removing your consent from being governed, and getting involved in the embassy and all that kind of stuff, one of the things that I do, and I don't even say this in my workshops, but I feel compelled to say it here, is I put out my intent. Whenever I travel or any of that kind of stuff, I imagine shields going up. Okay, kind of like on the USS Enterprise, shields up. Okay, and I believe that protects me. And I can't explain how I can travel for 5 years with just one incident. But I believe my intent has a huge impact on that, and just visualizing shields going up. Carrie and I both witnessed moose and deer running across the road, and then turn around and go right back out, and then as soon as we pass them, they go back again. We've never had an incident with wildlife or any of that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Well, there's one thing I wanted to say about that, because when you were saying about the shields, it's also opening up a permission for whatever things that you're not sure may come your way. That's in the same way, opposing just putting up shields, that's also opening a door up for whatever may come. I'm welcoming you. So I don't know who may want to enter that space, but I'm giving you permission ahead of time for anything to come. So that allows, because a lot of times people always have the shields up and they don't let anything new into their lives.
Well, Carrie and I haven't had a job for 6 years now, and Carrie and Carrie and I both live with a trust that whatever we need, we will receive. Not what we want, but what we need. And sometimes what we need isn't what we think we need, because there are things that are going to happen that seem to be physically hurtful, but it's what our spirit needs. So things that are happening in the world isn't for our benefit physically, but also spiritually. And a lot of people have a hard time, well, why is God so mean? He took my 6-year-old son. Well, that may be something for you to help you with your spirit, even though it was physically painful. So just because I don't fully understand or comprehend what the need is at the moment, I embrace it, and I do everything I can to learn as much from the experience as I can. Okay. So, yeah, one more question, then we'll...
I was wondering, if you don't have insurance and registration and a license, how do you drive? What happens if you get pulled over?
I don't drive.
Don't drive.
Driving is a commercial activity.
Yeah.
Like I said, words have meaning, okay, and powerful spells. So I don't drive. I travel. Now I know I don't think you've been to any of my workshops, so for me to explain all that I've done this isn't the venue to do that. That would take 2.5 days for me to fully explain it to you so you can comprehend the full scope of what I do. If you want to hint at it, ungrip is a hint, but it doesn't even come close to the full scope of all the work that I've done over the last 8 years. Okay. So I'd love to answer your question, but not today.
My question is a little bit connected with him, and I have more knowledge of them, but can you cross borders?
I probably could, and the approach I would take is very similar to what the embassy is doing, where I would do it through diplomatic means rather than as a person or a traveler or any of those other kind of terms, right? But for me, I have absolutely no desire to do that. My desire is to be at home and living within nature and nurturing and learning there, and because I can communicate with people. That's what internet and phones are all about. You know, I have no desire to travel. So thank you guys very much for coming out. I hope you enjoyed it. I just want to say I recognize the divine in each and every one of you, and I appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts and feelings with all these beautiful spirits that are here. So,
Thank you.